Still on. Yeah.
Okay, so thanks, Punit. Hi, everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of the Pune team for our third session on the science of storytelling by Harkirtan Kaur Sachdeva. Let me quickly introduce Harkirtan. Harkirtan has over 12 years of experience in IT industry with expertise in technical documentation and content strategy. She works as an information developer advanced with Siemens Digital Software. She has also been featured in Siemens Women Leadership Series. Her quest to bring innovation in technical documentation has led her to participate in one hackathon at Siemens. She, along with her team, devised and demonstrated a solution of using AI and machine learning to optimize for content services. So, welcome, Harkirtan, and over to you.
Thanks. Am I audible? Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I'll just get started.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Hello, everyone. Before we start the session, here's the moral of the story. If you'll get bored later on with the session, I thought just let me tell you the crux of things. So I'm obsessed with giving audience something that they don't see coming, and that's what storytelling is all about. Storytelling is about giving the audience those surprise elements, making the story unexpected and entertaining for them. Okay, so today's session is the science of storytelling. What exactly is storytelling? Storytelling is about creating, curating, and communicating narratives. Narrative can be about your organization, about your product, your service, about your team, or even about yourself. So how do you create the story, the aura around things, and how do you present it to the audience? That's what storytelling is all about. And the focus of this session is not to give you any kind of template, to tell that this is how the stories are made. It's all about telling you the technical and scientific aspects of enhancing your storytelling skills, of telling you that if you're a good communicator, there's a long way to go for us, as communicators also. Just having good communication skills doesn't make one great storyteller. There's a lot of technical and scientific element, that's involved in it. So we all are inherently storytellers, and we all tell stories, but very few of us, unfortunately, turn out to be great storytellers. Most of us waste an opportunity of storytelling. We come up with a lot of information, a pile of stuff to be told, and yet it doesn't translate into a good narrative. And what the user ends up doing is staring at the screen, or staring at the person who's giving the speech, or staring at the person who's talking, staring at the article, and then just waiting for it to end. So how can we catch hold of the attention of the audience, our clients, etc.? That's what this just the science of storytelling is all about. So this is the agenda. And as you can see that I'm not giving any template. There's a lot of hands out that I'll be giving, which will be very helpful to you. But there's no template involved because, frankly, for good storytelling, you have to be original. The roots of good storytelling lies in the originality of your content, how original you are when you present stuff. So, it's ingrained in the human plan. You cannot escape storytelling. You can be a digital marketing person. You can be a developer. Developers tell stories through applications. You can be an information architect. You're creating the whole structure of a story when you're information architect. You can be a journalist. You can be a scientist when you're telling stories. So basically, any profession, you need a strong narrative to keep yourself and your organization going. So we are not somebody who's invented storytelling. Storytelling was invented way back when cavemen started drawing, and pictography came into picture in Egypt, and also orally songs and chants started. Now we, instead of those songs and chants, we have the podcasts. Later on, what happened, and this was a revolutionary thing for storytelling, China invented paper and it reached Europe, and that's when written storytelling started. Slowly and steadily, we moved on to fantasy storytelling, the fairy tales. Now, the fairy tales, I've heard that Albert Einstein has said this. I cannot confirm whether he has said this or not, but it's said that Albert Einstein said that if you want your children to be intelligent, read fairy tales to them. And if you want them to be more intelligent, read more fairy tales to them. So whenever I'm thinking of presenting any story, whenever I'm thinking of presenting any presentation, giving any speech, or in general, my wallpaper of my office laptop, it's all out of Disney. I usually keep myself in that world because that's the world where the original content is all about. Later on, all you have is copy pasted stuff about philosophy, which doesn't stick to a normal life. Very basic stuff, very genuine stuff comes out of fantasies. Storytelling then later took the shape of interactive storytelling because video games came into picture. And why not just why just video games? Even our applications, we make the users interact with our applications. Isn't that a form of interactive storytelling? The user is given a chance to interact with us, create their own stories. Through the interaction. And then we have digital storytelling, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. So that's the world where all these other forms came together, and there's much more to explore. And that's where the problem lies. Right now, everybody can tell a story. Everybody has data with them. There is democratization of data. So everybody has the data, the graphs, etc. with them. How will your content stand out from the others? How will people be able to identify that this is your signature story? This is something that you would have done. So that's where the challenge lies for us. So what are the ingredients of good storytelling? There are three main characters, be it storytelling in cinema, be it storytelling in technical field, be it storytelling in marketing, or astronomy, anywhere. Three main ingredients. There has to be a character. Character is the hero. It can be your customer, it can be your product, your organization, it can be an individual. Then there has to be a conflict. What are you trying to achieve? What was the conflict all about? What will keep people hold on to their chairs and wait for the solution? And then there's the closure or the resolution. How this thing was resolved, the story, how did it end, whether it was resolved or not, whether there was a closure or not, or whether it's continuing. What is the end result of whatever you want to tell? Now, this is the first step, where when I said character, people are unable to characterize or humanize stuff in their technical presentations. That's a big challenge that we face. Now, we day in and day out, we work on structured documentation, data, we work on it so regularly. If somebody tells you how to explain data, somebody who's 7-year-old or 70-year-old, is your thought process telling you to tell them that there is one task and there is one concept task, and then there is one reference topic and we have this information mapping and stuff like that? Are you giving them technical jargon, or are you able to explain them data in form of a story? For example, I'll just quickly come up with something. So for example, to explain it to a 7-year-old or a 70-year-old for that matter, I can tell them that unstructured documentation is like an unplanned town or an unplanned city, where there are very well built houses, excellent architecture of the houses, but to reach to a particular address, the person always has to struggle. The visitor always has to ask people the address. Where do I go now? Okay, which turn to take, left or right? And the bigger that city gets, the more complex stuff becomes. The location of the address, it becomes more complex to track. At the same time, data is more like a developed township or a developed city where it's a very well planned township where the address is very easy to locate. And irrespective of whether the individual elements are as good or not as they were in unstructured documentation, there's one advantage that they have, is that it's very easy to locate. The structured content is just like a planned township. So are you thinking, when you're explaining concepts to people, are you thinking of humanizing those aspects, or are you just repeating what's written on the slides or what's written on Google? So many people, when they talk about storytelling, there are many courses online. You'll go to LinkedIn, you'll find many of them. You'll go online, you'll find many PDFs, many articles about storytelling, but none of them have impressed me as much as stuff written by this man from ancient Greece. So he had written it as a reply to Plato, who was his master. He was his teacher. So he's Aristotle, and he had written kind of notes. They are more like notes, lecture notes about poetics. Plato had mentioned that poetry and this writing, all this is very shallow, and Aristotle had given a response to Plato explaining the significance of storytelling. What storytelling is all about, what poetics are all about, how to form a good narrative. So I think till date, if anything has impressed me the most, has been his content. And right now, even his content is still valid. You can go back and read his notes on MIT website. Also, I've come across poetics being used as an example, even for technical concepts, for to increase the narrative within technology. So yeah. So what does Aristotle tell us? Aristotle says that whenever you build a story, there has to be a plot and has to be a character. Now let's take an example. An example of, say, a personal assistant, Siri or Alexa. So the plot is, 5 years ago, when the technology was very dumb to interact with human beings, and the character here is okay. The hero is human beings because that's the that's what people will connect most to. So human beings are the hero, and the supporting characters are these personal assistants who are actually solving the issue. And then comes the theme. So what is the theme? Now, if I have to talk about personal assistance, will I just explain these are the advantages of using a personal assistant, these are the disadvantages, and this is why you should use them, and end the story there? No. For me, the plot is about human beings. How the machines were very dumb and human beings were suffering because of that. And then, those human beings got introduced to these personal assistants. And the theme is humanizing of technology. So once I've identified the theme, I I don't care what the details are. You can fill in your blanks in between. But overall, the structure has been made. There is a theme for your PowerPoint or your speech or your writing, and there's a plot and there is a character. And now the finer details of it you can fill in. And then comes the spectacle part of it, the drama. So Aristotle said, then after you have your theme, which is like very, very important, after you have your plot and character, what's important is your decor. How do you present it? The presentation. So when we make a presentation, why do we focus so much on how the presentation will appear to the audience? Now knowing that this is an online conference, I was thinking that my photo will appear just as a small box at the side, but what people will see most is the PowerPoint. How can I make that PowerPoint presentation such that it speaks to the audience? So that's where decor comes into picture. The dialogue, whatever I will talk to you about, is my speech enough to influence you about theme, the plot and character, or not? Next is the melody. So I'm not singing any song or here, but at the same time, is there enough voice modulation in my in my voice? Am I arousing enough emotions to make you interested in this topic? That's what melody is about. And then comes the spectacle, the plots, twists and turns. So when you're seeing this presentation, are you sitting and thinking, okay, so now slide 9 will be benefits, now slide 10 will be disadvantages, slide 11 will be thank you. Are you already aware of what content will be there in my presentation, or is the content keeping you held on to your seats and think, okay, now what's next? So that's the spectacle part of it. And he said that once you have all these seven elements in place, that's called Aristotle's 7 elements of good storytelling. And you must go back and check his notes. They're very, very, very useful for learning. And I've not come across any better TED talk or any better article than what he has written. And then he said that in a story, there should be something, that arouses pity or fear or at least catharsis. Something in the story should, arouse some human emotion. For example, catharsis, relief from a strong, suppressed emotion. That, what is the relief that you're getting at the end of the story. So, next time you are given a task to, write an article or give a speech or, present a technical presentation on a very boring or a very mundane topic, try introducing these elements of storytelling, and you'll obviously see the difference. Okay, so story narrative. What kind of stories exist? When you plan your presentation or your speech or your article or your podcast, how do you plan it? Do you just start documenting it, or do you think what kind of narrative are you presenting? So there are four major types of narratives which are there. There are more, but these are the four major narratives which exist. The first one is a linear narrative. Linear narrative is, okay, 1970 this happened, 1980 this happened. So like, showing a perfect roadmap that, this is how stuff progress. For example, this is commonly used, when we explain the development of a product or an application. It started from here, it went till here, and then it was enhanced with this. So step by step process. Then comes non-linear. I'm not very good at non-linear at all, because non-linear is you start at a point, you go back, you have explained something, and then you come back and you explain something in present time, then you go back and say, no, this was done in this era. Something like, if you've seen James Cameron's Titanic, it's more like Titanic. Rose started the story, started telling story to the scientist. The film goes back, to the point, cuts back to the point, where of the past, and then comes back to the present, and then so there are concurrent, stories running. And this is one challenging, field, which this is one challenging narrative, but this is very good, very tough to master. But once you do that, we've seen the result of Titanic. Okay, so next is quest. Quest is more like presenting something as a thriller or as a detective story. That's like more like, when you're presenting something for hackathon, or there's some new idea that you've come up with, and you say, this is what I wanted to do. This is, something that was keeping me, awake the whole night. That this is not something that we're able to give our customers. I thought of this. I tried developing this. This did not work out, and then I tried this, and this worked out. So that's quest. You're looking out for some solution. The last is the viewpoint. Viewpoint is, something that amps up your mood, your sensory organs, more like the leadership speeches. It's, if you want to take an example, when I was doing a course with IIM Ahmedabad, one major, thing that we learned there was the movie Gandhi. That movie was shown to us, and we were told to take notes about the whole movie. And the whole movie, we didn't see it just like a story running. It was more like how Mahatma Gandhi used persuasion as a skill, to within his speeches. So if you want to improve your skill of presenting your viewpoint, become good at your leadership skills, at communicating what's there in your mind to the audience in a way that it strikes a chord, then there are many, there is one good book available, which is the world's 100 greatest speeches. So go back and read that. Also, I would advise you to go back and watch Gandhi, the movie, in a different taste altogether. Take your notebook, try to note where all he used persuasion as the skill set, and how well he was able to persuade. And no wonder the non-violence movement succeeded. Okay, so now taking an example, suppose you want to tell a story about your brand. How will you tell that story? This is just a very simple example we're taking, thinking that Aristotle's 7 principles, the decor, etc. You'll take care of it later. So, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Brand storytelling. So what is the person here? Who is in the story? The story is about your brand. How do you tell about your brand? Do you just tell that it is a software organization from the last 50 years. This is a manufacturing organization which is done excellent from the last 70 years. Or when your clients visit you, is there something more that you're able to offer? Are you able to start the talk with the indoors of your company, how the company operates, what is the culture within the company? Are you able to take those people back to your desks or to the shop floors or to the manufacturing units where the actual work takes place? So are you able to create that aura, while telling them about the work that you've done? Or is it just about the numbers, the process, how yeah, okay. So the plot, what is the whole process of developing the product or service? So, the ups and downs, the worries, the insecurities. Please don't hesitate in telling your insecurities. Like I very frankly told you, I'm not very good at the non-linear aspect of it. And to prepare for this presentation, the first thing that I had to keep in mind was that, okay, more than me looking, confident and, good on screen, what's important is my presentation should look good. So it was a big challenge to present something which is, which can represent me on screen without it being me. So, ensure that you present your conflicts throughout your journey. And what is the purpose? What is the goal? The goal, most of us say that, our company develops XYZ products. Great. There are thousands of companies doing that. Are you able to tell the purpose of your organization? What is the moot point behind your organization? I'll give an example. Tesla. Tesla doesn't present itself as manufacturer of luxury cars. It says that for us, what's important is our customers are early adopters of technology. So for them, that's the purpose. When you look at your brands, the taglines in your brands, the story behind your brand, is it communicating the mood point, the purpose behind your brand? Or is it just telling the shallow purposes, which is like, we are here to make money, these are the applications we develop? And same for our team. When you talk about your team, the team of information developers, is it just about giving them good documentation? Is it just giving them good communication services? When you talk about your team, and you represent it at a bigger platform, how are you curating that story? So what is the purpose? That needs to come from within. Data satisfies the analytical parts of our brain, but stories touch our hearts. So, the brands that touch our hearts, only they stay afloat. And, brand can be your company, it can be your team, it can be your product service, or it can be you. So, the narrative which is attached, if you're not in touch with your own narrative, with your own purpose, that's where there's a lack in storytelling. Okay, brain games next. So many a times, we're told that you're good at writing. Why didn't you try your hands at, movie making or journalism or stuff like that? Most of us would have been asked that question. Why don't you write something? Why don't you write a book or, a novel or something? So, for people who are inherently creative, the first instinct is to form a story. Like in a movie, what is most important is the art of storytelling. When we watch stories, what we see is the decor, the drama, the melody, the spectacle. That's most important. Then comes the story. And if there's a good storytelling aspect and good story, then later on comes the message. Messaging is not at the forefront of creative storytelling. The art of storytelling and the story and the message. So we have documentaries also, but at the same time, that art of storytelling remains in the forefront. But now when you're doing it for a technical presentation or in corporate world, what's most important is, have you understood the message? Firstly, you have to understand the message, create a story around it, and then comes the aspect of storytelling. And that's why it's ignored so much. It's thought that this is something which is secondary. But the truth is that this is the aspect where people fail, and this is the aspect where people succeed. So what differentiates a good company or a good a product from a great company or a great product? a good service from a great service is the art of storytelling. How is the narrative presented? Of course, there are finer details like, the technical aspects and how, it is marketed, etc. But at the same time, the storytelling aspect is very, very important. So now let's move to something that's talked a lot about these days, and it's actually genuinely important. And I'm glad that this was touched upon even in the first session, the panel discussion. There's empathetic storytelling, and there's a book by Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO. The book is Hit Refresh. And in this book, he talks about how the culture of the company was renewed, and he attributes the success of that renewal of the company culture to empathy. He said that people, there was a growing sense of empathy among people. And in this book of his, Hit Refresh, Satya Nadella talks 53 times about empathy. The word empathy appears 53 times. And that's a book by Microsoft CEO. How more technical can you get? So if empathy, you feel you can distinguish it and keep it away from technology, that's not going to happen now, because humanizing of technology has started, and it started for good, and we're on a great journey where more and more brands are becoming more and more humane. And people don't buy goods and services. Most of the time what they're looking at is how much can they relate to your brand. I'll give you a latest example. IKEA made videos at the time of pandemic. They, of course, everybody was busy marketing, and their advertisement stood out. Their advertisement was about make home count. And that all that it talked about was that we just visit a hotel, we visit a restaurant, we go to a picnic spot just 1 week, maybe in a whole year, 2 weeks in a whole year. We travel the world maybe 2 or 3 weeks the whole year. But where do we ultimately stay? We stay in our homes, and that's what we have ignored. And pandemic has taught us that we've ignored certain aspects of our home. We didn't pay attention to those, and this is time to focus on those aspects. And for that ad, they did not hire any top class professionals. They told their employees to record videos of home, how of them working from home and the challenges they are facing, etc. So that struck a chord with people. They thought, oh wow, this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm working from home right now. These are the challenges I'm facing. And then when I at least saw that ad, the first thing I thought was, oh my god, I should have thought, if I have to work from home, this is going to be a challenge for me. Where do I have to place my table, work table? Where for my daughter, when I bought a study table, why did not I think that in future if she needs a desktop screen also instead of just a laptop? So people are, when they're able to relate to your story, that's when magic is created. All right, so the topic of today is the science of storytelling, and there's no way we could have left without talking about science. So this is going to be a science lecture of all that I know about science, or all that I remember about science. So okay, jokes apart, we're going to talk about the scientific aspect of storytelling. So Harvard had presented an article way back, I think in 2017, and after that there have been multiple articles that have come out. But they talked about a neuroscientist, Uri Hassan, who said that the story is the only way to activate certain parts of the brain. And this was told by a neuroscientist that that story is the only way that certain aspects of your brain are activated only through storytelling. So how does the brain react when we are told a good story? The first thing which happens is the neural coupling. The story synchronizes the listener's brain with the teller's brain. So first that synchronization happens. Next is the mirroring. People start imagining, that echo the experience. Oh my God, even I thought of the same thing, or I am also going through the same experience. Or what if I face the same experience? The mirroring happens. So first it's the coupling. You tend to relate to the individual. Then you start mirroring the thoughts. And then the cortical activity starts. Cortical activity, usually when you're just talking about facts, only two aspects of your cortex are activated. And stories activate much more. They activate the cortex, they activate the sensory cortex, the frontal cortex. So if somebody tells you what is empathy, next time you can give this definition that empathy is something, that introduces neural coupling, and then it mirrors the experience, and then there is cortical activity that starts, and then there are certain hormones which are released. So these are the three hormones which are released. Dopamine is released when there is an emotionally charged experience. Emotionally charged experience doesn't always have to be something that makes you cry. It can also be through somebody giving a very arousing speech. Cortisol is, that's when there is a conflict. Certain things, they stay in our mind. We see a bad image, or an image of a war happening, and sometimes, that conflict within us, we're unable to get out of that phase. Then the oxytocin is released, when empathy finally happens, when you start trusting that person. Suppose I'm giving you, this presentation. It started with you thinking, oh, maybe she's, this is going to be some kind of talk about storytelling. Few slides later, if you've said, this is interesting, and probably few slides later you start feeling that this is something which is going to be useful for me. And maybe a few slides later, if you start believing that I trust this person, I feel that this person has prepared well, and I can relate to this person, that's when oxytocin is released. This is just a very simple example, but empathy, whenever empathy truly happens, that's when oxytocin releases, and that's when the person can truly relate to you, your experiences, and can feel one with you. So, okay, so enough of science, we'll move on to technology now. Design thinking. So in design thinking, empathize is the first stage. When we talk about storytelling, many a times, communicators are told, you are a side business, in a way that, the core work is done by developers, by, testers, etc. And for us, we are told that, this is one of the optional elements. It's not. For us, I think we are great empathizers. For us, we are great, at forming a narrative. So we are great at understanding the audience. For us, our entire content is not based on some high level or low level design document. It's based on how well we understand the audience. So empathize is, this is the first phase of design thinking. And whenever next time somebody tells you, that communication is just one of the aspects, it's not. Forming a narrative is the root of building a good application. And the core of being a good communicator is being human. I usually call it de-story and re-story. So you destruct a story, you destruct a narrative, and good communicators are great at destructing the existing narrative and reforming a narrative which actually suits the audience. Many a times you'll come across content where you feel, okay, this is not good for the audience. This is a very simple, very basic example. So this is not, I think this will not resonate with the audience. I think this should be constructed this way. That is the very base where you've started destructing thing, and empathizing with the audience, and restructuring it to form a more useful user experience through your content. So now comes, data storytelling. So unfortunately, graphs and dashboards, they cannot speak, and numbers, they sound very boring. So, you will many a times you'll come to slides where, see, okay, you see certain numbers and you cannot relate to them at all. And you just are waiting for that to pass, and then you feel, maybe I'm bad in mathematics. Am I not getting this? Am I not interested in this kind of content? No, it's not about you. For anyone, a lot of numbers, a lot of statistics, they can mess up the brain, because our brain can only take so much. So that's why now Gartner, projects that by 2025, data stories will be the most widespread way of consuming analytics. So data analytics is now being enhanced by another profession, which is called data journalism. Data journalism is, about presenting narrative around your data stories in a way which will stick with the audience. Now, if you want to, increase your storytelling ability through data, there are certain tools which are available. We are done with the time of Excel, dashboards, even dashboards, the simple dashboards which used to be there, PowerPoints, where we used to just create those graphs. that time is gone. Google Charts, Google Data Studio, these are the basic tools which are easily available with us. Data wrapper is used at places where you have to use simple analytical things. There is not very complex form of data, and all you want is, this is a user friendly open source tool, so basic interactive charts can be created through it. Tableau Public is much more interactive, and this is all free. So it's a free software, and it allows you to plug in your spreadsheet and come up with wonderful charts. But at the same time, what's important is, seeing all these graphs, don't tend to just lean on to this one, thinking that this is, wow, this is moving well. There has to be a reason why you use that particular type of chart. We'll talk about it later. So, okay. So now we've talked about facts being important. We've talked about imagery being important, and imagery has come through those tools which I talked about. You can use various tools. As an example, I've told you about Tableau. I've told you about Data Wrapper, Google Data Studio, Google Charts. But what is the most important is the narrative. How do you form narrative around it? Ruthless editing is required. When you're given with data, you might be given with data which is like, this thick, a booklet, maybe 30 pages of data. How do you, navigate through that data and take out what is important for the user? How do you go back and convince the management that, this all data can be kept, for further reference, keep it in your PDFs for, further reference, but this is not what the user can take in at one moment. So it's very important that you ruthlessly edit your data and just present what is most important, because don't confuse the users, don't scare them from the charts which show too much of graphics and too much of numbers, because for us we can take in just just that much. So this is a good example of all of things that have been covered, but at the same time there is you can take a screen grab of it. This is very useful, where all type of charts have been shown. What would you like to show? Do you want to show comparison? These are the various forms of comparison charts which are there. Do you want to show distribution? You can have it in histograms or scatter plot. Relationships, again, scatter plots are very helpful, and for scatter plots, usually Tableau Public is very useful. Composition, do you want to show composition? But at the same time, I don't think my eyes can go beyond this. At least, beyond what would you like to show? Comparison, distribution, composition, relationship, and my mind gets switched off, because I can see all this and I find all this very similar. There is not much, visualization technique used here, though this has all the information. This is more like an encyclopedia of, what kind of charts to present when. But so when you create your charts, I've given you example of the tools which you can use. But what is the most important thing that should be there? This is called call to action. So this is one thing which they have gotten correct. What would you like to show? So your call to action has to be there. Don't present a graphic which doesn't speak to the audience. There has to be something that tells them what exactly is in there for them. Don't just tell here types of charts, types of graphics. You can say here how do you present your numbers, how to present your numbers effectively or efficiently. So there has to be a call for action. 3-act play has to come into picture. Now, how is that 3-act play important? You have to be able to present that, this is the issue which you're facing, and if you do like this, then show through that plot, that this is how the impact would be. So try and involve that 3-act play of character, conflict, and closure through your charts. There has to be something that charts tell them, not just, this is the highest value, this is the lowest value. So do not waste, the time of the audience with that. And then just like here, there is too much of chart junk. This could have been simplified so well. So eliminate chart junk. Eliminate chart junk, because our eyes can only handle few things at once. We're not good at registering everything that that we see, and we'll see it again scientifically how that works. So what's the moot point? Do you just have to tell stories because you know stories? In data storytelling, do you just include stories for the sake of including storytelling? No. Let's take an example. Suppose you're working with a company, a transport company, a cab transport company, say like Uber or Ola. So what is the kind of narrative that you'll present while giving data to your audience. So Uber has been doing this great, and same with Ola. So you first have to navigate audience through their experience. Suppose you're sending them statistics about their usage of the service. So there has to be a linear navigation when you're doing data storytelling. Stick to a linear navigation. Let the story navigate step by step. There has to be a journey, that in 2014 you started using our service. In 2016 you started using the shared service. In 2018 for the first time you used our international service. So it has to be navigation. The user should be able to relate to your journey and say, oh wow, in 2018 I traveled to X country, and that's when I had used this. So the journey has to be in sync with the person's journey. Then let it be dynamic experience. Don't use 30 pages to tell the story in different ways. Dynamically show it on the chart that if you click here you will see how much money have you spent on travel. If you click here you will see the amount of savings that you've done. So try and create a dynamic experience on a single screen. If that's not possible, then at the same, what you can do is make it visually appealing at least. Then have progressive disclosure. As I said, to 2014, 2015, 2016, the information shouldn't come at once. You have used this cab service 30 times in these many years, out of which 20 times it was, international travel, 10 times it was. So don't make it too confusing for the user. And then there has to be a balance of narrative. You have to use good narrative that can stick to the user. Don't talk about your journey alone. Talk about try to make it very creative. For example, if you tell the user you've traveled with us 10,000 kilometers or 20,000 kilometers, the user will say, okay, fine, that's because I've paid for it. I just traveled that much. If you say that you've driven the equivalent of two journeys around the earth with us, the user will say, oh wow, that's great. So try to bring in, as I said, humanizing of technology, humanizing of storytelling. That's very important. So storytelling always beats statistics. As I said, you've traveled across, with us, you've driven across Earth twice with us. That's the amount of kilometers you've traveled. That will stick with the audience. The audience will not remember the statistics alone. That can come as secondary, but ensure that you link a narrative to whatever you're saying. So for us, we feel that whenever we are given data, one thing that we face is we given that data. The first thing we do it, we put it in Excel and we press F11 and we interpret it. Okay, so this chart is looking great. Let me present this data. But what we fail to do is scrub the information, explore what is the mood point of that entire chart and what the audience will actually be interested in, and model it in a way that it can resonate with the technical as well as the creative part of the brain. And I've intentionally written it as muddle and not middle, because this is the portion, this is the muddle where we get stuck. We don't do this enough, and we just obtain data, we interpret it. So when data comes on screen, the only thing we tell is, this is the information that I wanted to pass on you, and all that we are waiting, and even the audience is waiting, is for that slide to go away. So when you are storytelling through your data, when you have to present numbers, you have to adopt data science approach for storytelling. Now comes visual storytelling. And visual storytelling is very important. It has been important since 30,000 BC. And okay, so now the scientific aspect of visualization and perception. So many a times, we are told that in most of our brand presentations, no animations, keep it simple. These are the colors you have to use. But I disagree with that respectfully. I don't agree to that. And thankfully, yesterday evening, I read a LinkedIn post by Professor Ed Barr. He's from CMU, Carnegie Mellon University. He's the communication coach there. And he was their chief marketing officer of iCarnegie, the one of the streams of Carnegie Mellon University. And he wrote that The first sentence, if I can recall it correctly, he wrote that if you are creating a PowerPoint, comma, animate. So I was like, thank God, this sticks to the narrative that I have to present tomorrow. So, he said that animations are very important, and I agree to it completely, because, when you see something moving, your eyes, are attracted to that. I'm sure the first thing you saw here was this.
Harkirtan, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We are already over time,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I will just take 5 minutes and wind up.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, okay. So, so what happens is our eyes register the particular light, and it goes into the long-term memory. So our visual brains are attracted by color and difference. So whenever you're presenting something visually, ensure that you have a certain difference between the shapes or between the way the text is presenting and color. At the same time, it should not be a lot of color, because then our brain will not be able to register enough. Now, what is the primary aspect when you're presenting good visuals? The most important thing is don't rely too much of icons, or try and use relatable content. For this slide also, when I had to choose something to put here, I tried to put an eye here, and if you can see, your attention will not go away from this retina. This is, your eyes will stick here. So try to use, good visuals. Have your content which is visually appealing when you're doing visual presentations. Try and make people feel through your content. So what's your story now? The purpose of storytelling is to make people think, and that's why I did not include any template here. I've included things which can make you think about storytelling. And a few tips that I can give you is that death by 1,000 bulleted points. Don't use too many bulleted points in your content. That kills the whole story. And if you see in this whole presentation, this is the only place where I've used bulleted points. Don't just throw all the information on people. Don't overload them with everything that you know about a particular topic. Don't announce that this is the story that I'm going to tell you. At the same time, be truthful. Don't leave it to the audience to discover information, and don't scare them, with the content that you present. Don't invoke fear amongst them with the words that you use. We as technical writers are used to, saying things with you must do this, you should do this. That sticks to the technical writing aspect, but as a communicator, come up with things like, if you want to do this, if you need to do this. Try and be more sensitive to the audience. And don't run with your story. That is something I'm doing right now because I'm out of time. Don't run with your story. Be at a good pace and present things in such a way that the users can register. So, figure out your own story and tell it your own way. So this is the way in which I chose to present, that there is a lot of content overload and our attention, span has fragmented. So present your story, in your own way. Try and choose your own narrative. And what I've done for you, for this session is I've given you basics of what, storytelling is all about. Along with that, I have come up with few, post-session PDFs that you can refer to. There is a PDF on self-analysis. If you go to that PDF, I'll just open that here if that's possible. Yeah. So you can analyze, what are you more comfortable with, which is your approach to storytelling. What are your strengths as a data storytelling? How is your oral preparation? Where do you lack? You can analyze this. Your story selection, plot, what are you great at? Your selling points, which you want to hone, your biggest worry while delivering your content, and what is your action plan? You can keep revisiting this every quarter probably. Then, okay, I'll go to this first. This is your data storytelling assessment. So whenever you're creating a data story, you can use this template, data scrubbing. What is the data that you're retaining? What is the thing that you're eliminating? What are the stuff that you're reserving, in case it's needed? Data modeling, visualization techniques, data interpretation. So all this is a great template, and I've created it myself. You'll not find it on internet. So this is something that I've created based on my experience. The more you get experience in this, you can hone this this template. And then this is fun exercise that I've written. For example, this is structured authoring. How would you infuse the description with empathy? So for example, the example that I had given. So similarly, you can use this to enhance your storytelling skills. How would you explain agile to people? I would probably, okay, just something that came to my mind truly, like right now, I can tell that it's like filling petrol of 500 rupees and then stopping after every, after finishing that petrol and seeing, getting it serviced again. So you can come up with your own stories to explain stuff. So these are the three, documents which probably the team of TWT can give you post the session. And I hope the session has been helpful to you. Come up with your own story and tell it your own way. Apple told the story, not just of being, a great technologist. They said that, you're different, you're unique. You're iOS users, you're not Android users like everybody else. Starbucks doesn't sell coffee by saying, yeah, our coffee is great. There are better Italian cafes out there. They said that you deserve a sophisticated place for conversation where you're always welcomed. So come up with your own narrative, and anybody who's come up with their own narrative, their original narrative, and stuck to that, they've succeeded. So storytelling is never going to go away. We're all addicted to stories. Even when our body goes to sleep, when our mind stays up all night telling us the stories. And the last thing that I want to tell right now is the technology of storytelling will never take away from the humanity of storytelling. So always ensure that the content you present, is more relatable, is more humane, and you can use the best of technologies, best of the slide creators, but if you do not infuse it with enough humane elements, it's never going to stick with the audience. And with that, I'll wrap up the session, and I hope this has been of help. Thank you. Thanks for giving me a chance to present something that I'm very passionate about. Thanks. Over to you, Meenal.
Hi, Harkirtan. We are so sorry to rush you because we are short on time.
No, that's fine.
We've overshot a bit, so I think there's just one question from Shrutika that as technical writers, how do we empathize with the audience? And if you can give some practical tips for it. So if you can answer it in like a minute, we can take this question.
Sure. So the quick tip that I can give is when you're told that, many a times, even in interviews, if I asked, how do you empathize with the audience? The first thing they say is that audience analysis. How do you analyze the audience? Have you met the audience? If you've not, have you understood even if you've not met them, have you understood where they work? What is their work culture? So for empathizing with audience, it's very important that you understand them. Understand where they work, what is the area where they work, what is their skill set. Understanding them, is more important, and only then you can empathize with them. Otherwise, all the content that comes up will be similar to each other. So there are audience which are more technical. There are audience which don't need that technical stuff. There are audience which are high context audience. There are audience which are low context audience. So you have to understand what is their culture, what kind of audience they are, what kind of work culture they have in their workplace, what are their requirements, what are their needs, and only then you can empathize with the audience. And to empathize with the audience, you first have to put yourself into their place. It's very important that when you're given a requirement, you think from your perspective, that what would you have done? Would you have liked it as an audience or not? Then go back to the audience, have all your audience analysis, requirement gathering, etc., and then come back and match the notes and see where did you lack when you were analyzing them. And I think it's very important for us that we just don't use audience analysis as a term for the sake of saying it. And not all financial institutions want the same kind of documentation. Not all manufacturing institutions want same kind of documentation. Audience analysis is about knowing their culture, knowing them well inside out, and knowing their wants and needs and desires also, and then documenting content that is useful for them. So yeah, that's the quick tip that I can give. Thanks.
Right. Yes, thanks. So considering that we are very strict schedule, we will not be able to take any more questions for Harkirtan today. Participants can check the chat window for a post-session practice toolkit, and we are sharing the link for the same right now. And with this, it's also time for a short quiz. So we are pasting the link for a Google form, and you just get 1 minute to submit your answers, and there'll be 3 winners. So are we ready to pose a question? Yeah. So the time starts now. You have 1 minute. By the way, Harkirtan, it was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me an opportunity. Thanks.
Yeah, Harkirtan, the session was amazing. It brought so new, fresh perspectives.
Thanks, Puneet.
I can see the time constant, and I'm basically compelled to say that maybe later on we can have a better one with a bigger time.
Oh, sure.
I'm
Yes.
sure the audience will love more details. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Puneet.
Everybody, 30 seconds more.
Harkirtan, so post-session kit that you have shared is amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks,
It
Puneet.
will be very
Yeah,
helpful.
I wanted it to become a workshop, even though we had less time. I wanted it to become a workshop so that people can go back, experiment, and with the Telegram that you have, that amazing place where we can get together. That's where people can post their answers, or that can be a place which can be used for discussion.
5 seconds. We are closing.
Yes.
Submit your answers, guys.
Yeah, so interact on Telegram. Remaining questions we will mail to Harkirtan. She responds, and we will email. And the links that she had shared, we will be sending that also in email. So don't worry about those links. Okay, it's closing now. Thank you, everyone.
So we'd like to thank Harkirtan on behalf of Tech Writers Tribe and Team Pune for such an engaging session today. And we've really learned a lot about storytelling and how it can enhance our communication at work. And she's really shown a lot of enthusiasm and cooperation while we were, planning this event. So thank you once again. Thank you. It was great having you on board.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Harkirtan, and thank you, Team Pune. So now, it's power packed. And first of all, I would just like to say we are a bit delayed, not much, but a bit delayed. So please bear with us. And so sorry for this delay. And so the next, we are going to have the last session of the day. It will be hosted by Team Kerala, Rahul, Vinu, and Smera. So, and Sarah, you're there. So sorry in advance for a bit of delay. So over to Team Kerala.
Yeah, thanks, Vineet. I hope I'm audible and you can see me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are around the world. My name is Rahul Hari, and together with Binu and Matthew and Smera, I welcome you all to session 4 of TWT's half-day conference as part of our second Foundation Day. As we move to the final session of today's conference, I would like to introduce you all to our presenter for this session, Sara Kamen. So Sarah has been a technical writer for over 25 years now. She is a lead information developer at BMC Software's Israel office and has been authoring end user documentation in Wiki for about 10 years. I have seen Sarah help out many writers at BMC and also let her voice heard when she says documentation is as important as product development. I'm honored to say that she is my colleague and a mentor. It is my honor and privilege to welcome Sarah to present this session. A request to the participants, please keep your mics muted during the session. If you have any questions based on this session, please post them in the chat box. Binu will compile the questions and ask them at the end of the session. We also have an interesting quiz competition at the end. So stay tuned. With that, I hand it over to you, Sarah. The floor is yours, or maybe the screen.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, Sarah. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to share my screen and hopefully we'll get the right screen on. Are you seeing the presentation or are you seeing my notes?
We can see your presentation.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I'm going to try and keep this, to the point, and hopefully we'll finish in not too long. I'll, oops, hold on, just, there we go. So just a little bit about what we're going to talk about. I'll introduce myself and the subject. We'll talk about some of the advantages of working in Wiki, about what the authoring process is like, about permissions and restrictions. A lot of people are often very interested who can see what, and some of the not insignificant challenges that we have. So I found this quote that I really like. If you're uncomfortable meeting people on your own, the perfect way to do it is to volunteer to help. And I'm not someone who actually goes out and sort of puts myself out there, but I'm actually a really good helper. And it gives me an opportunity to reach out to people. So I'm glad actually I have this opportunity also. So who am I? My name is Sara Kamen. I'm originally from Chicago, which was on the opening slide of the presentation. I've been living in Israel for the last 25 years. I've been working at BMC for the last 13 years, and about 10 years ago we moved into Wiki, and so that's been a really interesting to see that transition. But I first saw a presentation about authoring end user documentation Wiki about 17 years ago, and I thought it was fascinating. And I also thought there was a lot of work still needed to be done in order to make it really useful. And some of that has come and some of that hasn't. Just showing you, though, that I live in Israel, this tiny, tiny little country that's about an 8-hour drive from the north to the south, in the middle of the night when there's no traffic. And I live in the way far north part of the country. BMC has 2 offices in Israel. One is in Tel Aviv, which is like the center of the country, and we're way up in the north. Okay, so what is this presentation and what is this presentation not? So this presentation is about authoring end user documentation in Wiki at BMC. It's not about the back end processes because we have a Confluence admin that's somewhere else in Austin, Texas, with some developers that he works with. And I don't know all of the ins and outs. I know that we have a hosting system. I know that we've got lots of plugins and things. I'm not even sure anymore what is native of this tool versus what are plugins. It's not an analysis of wikis in general. It's and I'm not going to talk about like we're not necessarily using all of the capabilities, and it's not necessarily even different from other online tools. So I'm not trying to convince you of anything, just showing you how we've been doing this. So before we moved to Wiki, we had many product groups from some from acquisitions. We still have many product groups, but the documentation was kind of scattered. It wasn't consistent. We did actually have FrameMaker to PDF in one business unit. And then in another business unit, they were moving to XML, which they actually took on for several years. We had static templates, old software versions, because they were so customized that in order to update them, we had to, it was just really too expensive and too disruptive to our processes. And we were also always dependent on the release cycle. We could only basically publish a PDF with the release. We couldn't make updates, fix anything from typos to incorrect information, or just, add additional enrichment information. And we also had multiple online help tools and procedures. So just to know what we're talking about ducks.bmc.com. This is our flagship. This is our documentation portal. This is what it looks like. I'll show some screenshots, and then afterwards, if you'd like, we can do some live demonstration, right? So this is what it looks like. You can come in, you can do a search for any particular product name, or there's groups so that you can, limit down your search. And when you get to a product, when you get to the product documentation, this is what the homepage looks like. And this was just a really nice quote. It was a usability consultant, SiteIQ, called it the crown jewel of BMC sites. So it's relative or whatever, but it was actually a nice to hear that our content was that its usability was considered good. So advantages. Why are we using Wiki? What made us choose this? So the obvious thing really is linking, right? We talked just previously about nonlinear stories. People can search. Our content is now searchable, right? And people can drop in on any one page, or while reading a page, there's links all over the place that'll bring you here and there. It's not like a book that you're just flipping page to page. It is no longer linear story. The solutions are made up of multiple products. So previously we had an installation guide, a user guide, a configuration guide, administrator guide, a developer's guide, and now we can put it all into one thing that we call a space and make that more easily searchable and better able to connect the content. We also have solutions that are made up of multiple products. And so with a linked system, we can also link to, like, if you have this product installed, see here, and we can bring them right to that point. We don't need necessarily to duplicate topics. We can use some single sourcing, but I'll explain later that it's not quite as simple as it might seem. And we can have continuous publishing. So one is that it is separate from the development cycle, that we can update it like at any time and just sort of push it out there, and right there we've fixed an error. We've been able to rewrite some content to make it especially we've been able to rewrite some content to make it more accessible and more task oriented. Some of our documentation is in old style still, right? It also really fits well with the agile development process, because as we break down stories, as a developer and QA are working on a feature, we are also then able to work on that feature, and that feature almost maps directly to a specific topic that we're working on. So we've almost got a one-to-one there. We're not including part of a chapter. It's not a whole chapter. It's a part, right? And we can work that into the agile development cycle. So user experience is also a great advantage. Any browser, any platform, any device, all of the common browsers, and it's a common user experience for all of our products, so that we can so that every user, when they come to it, they can see the same thing. They start to learn where they can find the right information. It's automatically updated. They don't need to go anywhere to bring a PDF or anything. It's just right there. Whenever they come to it, it's the most updated content. Search engine accessibility and web analytics. We can find out what our people's search terms are. How are they getting to our content? How long are they staying there? And they can find it on Google now. So we have internal and external comments, which is another great advantage. We actually get more real comments from developers, that are saying, other than more than just looks great. They can actually read the content, they can update it. Something about it being live also, that they know that we can fix it quickly, and they are part of that process. Customers can also leave comments and let us know whether it was helpful or not helpful, or ask for clarification. Sometimes we have to refer them to support because it's more about the product as opposed to the documentation, but we are there to help out also. And we actually get more of that than we ever did before. Flexible work environment. It's open source. We can work on any browser anywhere. We've got macros that are built in and homemade and third party, and I don't know all of what is what, but there's a lot of different things that the developers can make to help it work better and better for us. It has a built-in content management system with history. It's WYSIWYG-ish. It's you see some kinds of markups and bits, but you basically are authoring and able to see it right away. And then we also have an HTML markup so that you can go in and make fine-tuning. And again, the updates are automatically pushed out. So this is just an example of an inline comment where somebody could just select some text and add a comment. This is an option that's available only to employees, and only employees can see them and respond to them. And we try and separate that because we don't need the whole world seeing all of our internal discussions. And this is part of the review process. So we can do internal comments. You can also leave a comment at the bottom of a page. Also, just in emails and other documents as we're referring back and forth, or on our BMC community site, we can also just send links and tell people this is where you can find the information, and it brings it right to that point. I just bring that up because also sometimes our commenting is done in email, but the email, it's not out of nowhere. We still have a specific place to go to, and we know what we're doing. This is just an example of a history page where you can see that the document's been worked on, and you can click these little check boxes and click compare and see what's been changed by the time when a certain change was introduced. This is what it looks like in an editing view. So we've got some macros and things that are here, and you can see it's in a table, but it's not too far from what it would look like when we have it in show view. And this is also just what the code editor looks like, and it helps us sometimes with some of the spacing. We get sometimes in copying and pasting, we introduce certain spacing issues. But this also helps us sometimes make adjustments that for whatever reason the WYSIWYG isn't responding well to. So authoring. So what is it we do day to day? So we have content that's organized into spaces, right? All of the content is in a hierarchical model. We've got information architects that help us to order the information so that, again, users can find what they need in the same places every time. And then data categories are kind of light because there's no real enforcement, but we try to separate our topics into tasks and concepts and references. Hold on, I'm just going to bring one up right now so you can see what that looks like. No, just a different. Here we go. So here's our dashboard, and here, as you start to type in, you can find content. By product name. There's also a search bar up here. We have a few different kinds of searches, and here's a product space, and this is everything that's inside. So we've got administering a reference and customizing after integration for certain things, upgrade, installing, like it's all here. And other spaces have similar similar structure, right? So users start to learn what they can find where, what they see. Okay. So here we go, the content model, right? And our WYSIWYG editor is fair. It's not too bad to read through and to be able to type through and see more or less where things go. And then you save it and sort of realize things have jiggled a bit, and so you have to come back into it a bit. So it's not great, but it's not bad. A wide variety of macros that actually give us all kinds of possibilities, like a child macros, for example, and talk macros, table of contents macros, so that we don't have to actually enter in links individually, that these are automatically built. It has the basics of tables and graphics and hyperlinks, and in some ways, because it's just Wiki, we are forced to sort of simplify some of our presentation. We have to sometimes rethink it. We can't have, big fancy tables that go across, that go sideways and or whatever, with too many merged cells. We can, but so it helps us to sort of rethink in some ways. So we've got, here's an example of a child macro. So here was a tab with several pages under, and we can say that we've got, the section provides information about the following topics, and we can do that, and it's built automatically. So that's a nice advantage. And our hyperlinks are also added fairly easily. There's several different ways to add a hyperlink to a page and add a hyperlink to a section in a page. So, so it's fairly straightforward, and it's actually, again, very nice to be able to easily within a topic just refer users to where they can get more information. We also have labels and metadata, or labels as a kind of metadata, but you can search by a label. You can generate a PDF. Our users can generate PDFs, and we can generate PDFs by a specific label. And the labels are also used for indexes for the PDFs. And we also have this metadata macro, which helps us also to sort of increase searchability. We can add synonyms and such. This is just an example that when we put out, I don't know how well you can see this, but when we put out a maintenance release, all of the new items are tagged. And so you can click that tag and then see all of the pages that are related to the same release. And this is the metadata, which is, as you can see, like a very basic markup table, but it's just a macro, and it lets us add more information so that we can use it for building charts or reports or tables, and also for again for searchability and keywords. Online and offline help. Wiki is of course online, so so that's actually like great, because again, users users today are so used to just Googling to find an answer that they sometimes don't even notice that we have search boxes within our documentation, and who can beat Google anyway. Context sensitivity mechanism, so that you can click on an icon in the UI and it brings you to the specific page for that element or for that area. There's also mechanisms for generating an offline version of the documentation, because we have users who are air gapped, like they can't access an external internet. So we have another way of packaging it so that they can access the information it's a snapshot. So unfortunately, it doesn't get updated in the same way. But at least they have the documentation with them. They're not left without anything. We have different ways of making versions and of conditionalizing text also, and also different, we can do translations. So here's just an example where here we can see that this is the version. If you open that up, you would see all the different versions we have, and each new version automatically inherits from the previous version until we make a change to it, and then it breaks off from the earlier versions. So but it builds up, so that's all right. These are like all the different variants, and over here some of them are grayed out because they don't apply to the specific variant. And it's kind of hard to see here. We've got a bunch of repeated text here, but it's because each one applies to a different variant. And it's, like I said, it's hard to see. One of them is actually, some of them have stripes through them, which means that they're not for the currently selected variant. But it's ways so that we can use conditionalized text and use the same base for documentation that's very similar, or from the same often from the same code base, and it generates out to 3 different products or more. And this also, we've got translation, and users are able to select in runtime both a version. They can see here's this one's coming to the current version, and also they can select a language. Export content, it can export to XML, but actually only our Confluence administrators can do that because it's very resource intensive. We have HTML export that we can use to generate offline help. Word, which is for internal and for our customers, they can we can generate to Word. That can be helpful sometimes for reviewers that want to sort of rewrite a section or more intensive notes or something, but also to customers who want to add their own notes basically and have their own copy. And also we have PDFs that we provide, a PDF of the whole space. Again, because that's rather resource intensive, so we try to limit who can do that. But for a specific branch or for a specific group, our customers can also generate a PDF. Okay, moving on to permissions and restrictions. So we have different kinds of space permissions for groups and for individuals, with different options to edit and
No. I will not take any of it. No riskies.
sorry.
Then choose content.
Excuse me, can you
Okay.
mute your mic?
And somebody,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
Sorry.
So we have different ways of we can provide permissions for users to edit or delete or add comments. People who can find it on Google, we have users who are registered and logged in, and when they're registered and logged in, they can leave comments. And if they're not, they can see the content, but they can't leave a comment. If we have certain content that's only available to our registered users, only to people with customer support accounts, which can control a branch or a specific topic. We have things that that users can reach but not necessarily see, so that legal information and content that when they generate a PDF, for example, it's still attached to it, but they don't need to see that in the structure or anything. Let's see, here's oops. There we go. This is one of the pages that have permissions. So you can see that there's different kinds of permissions that we can let users have. And again, we have for anonymous users can basically view. That's the only thing they can do. They can't even leave comments. So internal and external page views. We have a place that we work, which is only internal, where only employees can see. And then we publish out to a target space, and that's the place that everybody can see. We can work in parallel on different projects. We've got a new GA, general audience version that's going out in July, but we have a fix that needs to go out in the middle, and so we might publish in the middle again. We again, like I said, we can make updates to already released materials, and we have date stamps so that users can actually see when it was last updated. We have show if macros so that we can make sure that, again, users can only see the content that we want them to see. Some information is hidden for anonymous users. For example, we have our notices page, which has our release notes and technical bulletins and flashes. And we want basically only our customers to see that. We don't need the whole world seeing all of our fixes and such, and so this is content that's only accessible to our registered users. And let's see. And again, our employees can insert comments that are internal, so that only we see them. they can access our master spaces or our source spaces to leave comments. And we can also tag writers and SMEs in our comments so that they are getting additional notification. You know, just like in Jira, it's the same company. So, if any of you are familiar, so some of these challenges are challenges, and I often like to say that that like my children, I don't like to compare them. I like to appreciate them for each of their individual talents and characteristics and what they have to give. And I would say the same thing with authoring tools, right? It's, you know, it might not be as good at certain things as other tools, but and it might even be really bad in some cases. But this is just what we have to work with. And so some of it is a certain amount of transparency. We had, so first of all, our names show. And so it's kind of out there, right? And that's actually where I got to a point where I used an avatar for my a little cartoon picture for my profile, because it almost seemed like just a little too personal that somebody was knowing who was writing the documentation. And let's see. Oops, sorry. There was also an issue at the beginning. We had a terrible issue with users actually being able to, our customers being able to accidentally see internal comments. And it was terrible. I mean, like, not terrible if we're not doing state secrets or trade secrets and there's no obscenities, but it just seemed it was unprofessional for them to be seeing some of our internal comments, and so we had to change different methods. We used to have a single source method where everything, sorry, a single space method where everything was all in one space, and what we did was when it was marked complete, the users could see it. But there were all kinds of loopholes where users could see some content and then accidentally see some pre-release content, and that just, it wasn't working. They could see edited content and they could see internal comments, and that was a real problem. So they worked really hard. One of the things that we have is a presentation layer now on top of the regular Confluence. It's another plugin, and it helps to restrict what users can see. And going into a source and target space model also really helped to separate things. IT infrastructure support, right? So it's all online. So Rahul and Bino can say that can witness how difficult it has been when there's issues, and we have to wait for our support team to wake up in the United States before they can help us address these issues. And there's something, you know, it's an online thing. So when your internet's down, you're down. So we have this hosting system, which was part of our problem, or they're not the source necessarily of the problem, but they were. But that is just another layer. So it's not even just us. We have to now contact the hosting system to see what's going on. We can access their logs, but we can't, you know, figure out all those things. And our infrastructure team includes like one writer and several programmers, and so. It's a lot of work to support. How many writers are we across BMC? I'm not sure. I think we're 100, 200 or so, and it's on like 3.4 million topics of content. So that's a lot of work for these individuals. We have reuse, and it's not bad. We inserted variables for product names, because our product names every 3 to 4 years change, and so it was easier to use a variable. And then we had to switch the kind of variable, the macro that we were using, because one variable, it turned out, didn't work well with translation. So now we had to use a different variable. And then that variable causes trouble when we want to copy a space. So every time we're like, okay, I think we got it. And then there's a little bit, another obstacle that we have to overcome, right? We could do pages and paragraphs, but for reuse and for conditionalizing, and so it's not too bad actually, but it can also be clunky, and also sometimes just to see what that content is as you're trying to work in the WYSIWYG editor, all you see is the macro, and the macro is just saying this content is reused. So you have to open it up or go to that page to see, and so it's hard to get the flow of the page really. And sometimes it's actually hard to track the reused content. It's getting a little better, but we would have content that was reused in several spaces, and we'd make an update, and where was it being updated everywhere? We needed to check all those different places to make sure that we were getting things, that the updates were appropriate. And so that involved this extra process, extra, note taking, and you had to rely on our writers to be able to keep up with that content and to remember to add it. So it wasn't always the easiest to track. And then, sorry, this is a deep hurt, is that it doesn't have global find and replace. Like we can export to XML, for example, and then an XML, and now, of course, we can't. Again, our admins can. And then if we were to do a find and replace there and then re-import it, it doesn't round trip well. So it's really not an option. We are now at a point where they can write certain scripts to do certain kinds of replacements, but they're very nervous about that because, of course, it's not like we can go in and say, yes, 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 no, yes, yes, no, skip, 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 yes, 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 right? It's either all or nothing. So we have to be very, very specific about what kinds of things we want them to be able to do. We have, there's no spell checker. in the native in the tool. We have spell checkers in our browsers and such, but it can be really embarrassing. It's documentation. This is, we have typos and all kinds of things, and not to have a spell checker. I mentioned the export and import isn't very good, and the search inside the wiki. I'll show you an example. It's a little silly sometimes. So here's just an example of what it's like not to have a spell checker, right? So here we've got the tall letters. So sometimes just in typing, you mix up the letters or something, and in the topic title, it doesn't show the incorrect spelling, although it'll show it incorrectly in the body of the text, which is why, again, we've started using more macros also for our product names, because also between the variations in them, you just want to make sure you have the right one all the time, and that you don't have embarrassing mistakes of like misspelling your own product name. And even though we submitted to editors and everything, again, all these tall letters are hard sometimes to see, that they've made a mistake there. This is just an example of the search on our messages library. Our messages library has a very specific code for each message. This is a mainframe product, right? And so users are looking up a code, and every code ends with a letter. I for information, W for warning, E for error. And if you search just for the number without the final letter, it won't find it. You need to add a star at the end. And to be fair, Google can't find it either because it just doesn't have that much traffic, right? Google will find it if it's the exact one, but our internal search. And look at the way, if you're putting in a partial string, like if it's at the end, it's not a problem. That's sort of a natural way many of us are familiar with, just putting a star at the end and anything that comes after that. But a star at the beginning doesn't work. So we can't do it that way. And we have to put in like all these just weird different ways of making the macro just in order to get the information that we want. And it's just not very user friendly. So that's the end of the presentation. I saw these wonderful, beautiful presentations before, and mine was death by PowerPoint bullets, and I hope it wasn't too bad. I can show you some of our documentation live and what you can see when you're logged in or when you're not logged in, about different ways of editing. But if there's any questions, I'm available for questions. So I'll stop now and if there's any questions.
Thank you, Sara. I think we have quite a few questions lined up actually. But
Okay.
before that, I'm actually going to share the link for the quiz. So let's see how many learned how much, and then we'll go with the questions. So I'm sharing the link for the quiz in our chat box, and the link will be open for 1 minute for everybody to answer. So go ahead, your time starts now. Yeah. I'll just wait for the quiz time to get over so that we can start with the questions which are coming your way, Sara.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, 20 seconds more. Ten seconds more.
This is exciting. It attempts me to start the countdown.
Okay, now closing in 5 seconds. Please submit if you are halfway. Otherwise, it's going to close now. 3, 2, and that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, I'll go ahead with the Q&A. So the first question, Sarah, for you is from Amol, and he wants to know what is the latest version of Wiki that is being used for authoring.
So we're using Confluence, and I actually have no idea what the version number is, but I do know, that we're using Confluence Server, and that ends that goes to end of life or end of support in another 2 years. And so I wrote to our admin and said, so what does that mean for us? Confluence has a Confluence Data Center and Confluence Cloud, and we'll probably be moving to Data Center, but we're kind of locked in on a contract right now, so we can't even move. We can't necessarily move early, but they're starting already to test what it's going to be like to know, because we have some 1,200 content spaces, and like I said, some 3.4 million pages, and so it would be very difficult to go through all of that. So we're hoping for an easy transition.
So just to add on that, at BMC, we use Confluence 7.13.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so there was a question from Kalpana asking if this is an on-premise version. So I think you've answered that as well, since this is the cloud version that we use. We have quite a few questions from Vishakha. So, the first question that she started with is, I find it difficult to customize the wiki pages with respect to branding. So I'm curious to know how the dashboard and the space landing page is designed using Confluence macros.
So we use, hold on, let's come back to this. We use an overlay macro or add-in or whatever called a viewport, and that helps to give us some better control over the style sheet. It helps to give some white space around the edges. It helps. Some of these are just internal wiki page or just specialized wiki pages. So some of the customization is just really through the sorry, is through the graphics and stuff that we use. I don't know again too much about that because that's done on the back end. We sort of inherited it, but there was a recent issue with some update that that changed the way our code view was appearing. Right, our code blocks and monospace text, which it wasn't supposed to, but it didn't change the appearance in our in the wiki. It changed it in the PDF. So we've got also that as a secondary deliverable form that we need to check also. So I don't know too much about it. I know that we have just some of the basics. We try to come up with different. We have, and again, I don't know if it's a plugin or not. We have something called layouts. Let me see if I have one that's open. You know what? Actually, let me just bring up one that I've been recently working on that I know has layouts. There you go. So in our layouts, we try to come up with a consistent way, and some of it's by business unit, and some of it's by company wide, right? So we use these layouts, and in the layouts, you can change columns and such. So we've got columns here, and then some of them would have like the related topics right up here, right? And other units, business units, put them down at the bottom, related topics, for example. So this one doesn't have them in yet, but so that was just different ways of being able to at least come up with a unified look, if nothing else. But I think the main issue is that we have viewport, and viewport is what gives us the most control over what users are seeing.
Thank you for that. I think, Vishaka, I hope your first question is answered. So moving on to the next question is how to plan the page tree structure. Is it similar to TOC?
Okay, so we actually have a product model that our information architects have put together, and so they concentrated mostly on the top level. So that we have notices, for example, you know, things about TBs and service packs and such are right at the beginning. Some getting started, it's usually conceptual information. Sometimes it's also use cases and such to help users get into it already. Planning, installing, and configuring after installing. These are all basic topics that we have at the beginning, so that our customers know what to expect in each one. Planning would be about architecture, perhaps, or about prerequisites, and installing would be the down-to-earth, nitty-gritty of how to install, and configuring after installation. So all of the things that we can do once it's installed, and maybe how to change some of the parameters that we set while installing. So all of these things. What used to be our user's guide is mostly in the using section. What used to be our administrator's guide is mostly in administrating. And sometimes there's a crossover between, for example, configuring after installation and administering. We might reuse content in there, or we might refer them to each other, right? This is really something you should do right after. And if you're doing it later, the administering section might refer you back up there, right? And or vice versa. This is something you might be doing throughout the life cycle of your product. So from configuring after installation, we might refer them to administering, or at least give them something to get started, and then for more information, go to administering. So these are the different. We also have. I'll just show. We have when we create a new topic, we can create just a blank topic, but we can also create topics based on templates that are also our information architects and content strategists have made. So if we go to a basic task, in there's also writer instructions. In addition to our own documentation that we have for our writers, we have these templates. And what's nice about the templates also, like here we see the different panels for like related topics, is that even if we don't use them all, it reminds us of all these things that we should be thinking about. Okay, before you begin, to do what? All right, what are the different things that we need? Do we need to add any specific reference, maybe here or in another topic? Examples, results, where to go from here. Where to go from here has been one of our big navigation elements that we try to add to help continue the story, right? To help tell users, okay, now that you're done here, go explore the world. Or sometimes it's a very specific step, and sometimes it's a more general topic that will refer them to.
Okay, thank you, Sara. So moving on to the next question, Vishakha wants to know if there is a way to validate broken links.
Yes and no. So we have different ways of working that. One way actually, and one of the perhaps easier ways actually, is to generate a PDF. And you generate a PDF with what we call a print layout, so that it put anything that is in the same space, for example, will show up with a page number next to it. So it'll show the link to the topic, and it'll also say page 47 or page 157 or whatever it is. And if it doesn't show a page number, it shows a link at the bottom of the page, like a footnote, right? And so when you print a PDF, you can do a real easy search then to find those that are linking outside of our wiki. So if it's linking outside of the wiki, then you know, two things. Sometimes we have links that go to outside of our one space, and it could be going to another space, and that's okay. And sometimes the link was entered wrong or just broken, and so that'll help us find that. There was also a time where they're actually fixing an error on this, where it was referred to page 0, and page 0 was actually a broken link to a section on a page, and that allowed us. So we had certain patterns to search for. There are actually some tools also in our admin to be able to find links and stuff that are not. But the reports are sort of. Sorry. The reports are unusual. We have to learn how to read them, right? So we've come to undefined pages, and this might be a link that's for whatever reason not going anywhere. Is it coming up? Yeah, it's taking a little bit of time. The wonders of working on an online tool. And so some of these that have our underscore, these are some of our internal pages, and usually there isn't a problem, but occasionally there'll be something like this that has that shows that there's a bad link, and this link is on this page. Now this icon here means this link is actually in a comment, so it might not actually be a problem. But we do have tools, internal tools, to help find that.
Thank you, Sara. I think that should help. And moving on, do we have the time to take a few more questions? But yeah, we can take one more question. So it's again from Vishaka. She wants to know about the permissions. Do they apply to space level, topic level, subtopic levels? And if we have set a set of permissions for a parent topic, does it carry over to the child topic? And how does that play?
Yes. So first of all, if you set permissions for a parent topic, then all of the child topics are inherit those permissions. And you can set permissions for a page or for a branch. As far as publishing goes, actually, which wasn't part of the question, but at first when you started asking, I thought that was a good point. You publish from we have our source space and our target space, and you can only publish the whole space. Now you can set it so that only certain topics are being published, but it'll publish all of those topics every time that you publish, right? It doesn't mean that it updates those pages, but if I just have one page I want to update in a 1,000 topic space, it goes through the whole process of publishing the whole thing. So that's actually not so easy. It's sometimes not best practice, but sometimes easier for us to just go into the target space, update it there, update it also in the master space, so that next time it is published, they'll be coordinated. But it's often easier to just make that and faster to make the correction in the target space. But again, as far as permissions, we are able to control which content only employees can see, whether it's in the master space or in the target space. And we can also set certain topics not to publish so that they will never make it to the target space.
I think that should answer Vishakha's question. And we don't have any more time to address few more questions that we have. I'll address them to you later. And all those who asked your questions, thank you so much. You will get your answers shortly. So on behalf of all of us and in TWT, I would like to thank Sara for taking her time out on a working day to, teach us so much about Wiki. And I think it has been insightful for everybody who's new to Wiki, especially, and has solved the doubts of many who are already using it or are thinking of coming on board the whole Wiki journey. So Sara, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise and your knowledge, for guiding us. And yeah, on behalf of TWT, this is all we have to offer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad I could be a part of it.
Thank you so